Complementary currencies have been around for decades, but what purpose do they serve, and when is a national currency not enough? Joining us now to shed light on these currencies, in Brussels, Belgium, via Skype, Bernard Lietaer. He is the author of Rethinking Money: How New Currencies Turn Scarcity into Prosperity. And Bernard, it's good of you to join us on TVO tonight. Let's just start with a very basic first principles kind of question. What is currency?
Well, it is not what economic textbooks say, which is usually a standard of value and a medium of exchange and a store of value, because that is what functions of money that currency plays, not the nature of money. Money is an agreement within a community to use something standardized as medium of exchange. That's my working definition.
Okay, and we know, for example, that dollars and euros and pounds and the list goes on. These are the things that we have agreed on will represent currency among us. What other kinds of currencies are there in use today? And if you would, focus particularly on North America.
Well, one of the oldest was started in North America. It was the frequent flyer miles. These are commercial purpose currencies which try to encourage loyalty of customers to particular airline alliances. This started 40 years ago. What these systems have proven is that you can now start a payment system on a very large scale. This is a world system. And there are 15,000 billion miles around. So it's not marginal. And they do this very cheaply. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it at all.
How do you think currency goes from being an idea to something legitimate that everybody understands is on the level?
Well, it depends on what the purpose is to begin with. We have been trained to believe that a country needs only one currency. We've been doing this for a while. And now, with the information age, all kinds of new media of exchange are appearing. Not only commercial ones, but also social purpose ones. And more recently, the crypto coins and things like that have been appearing in the internet exclusively. So we have a whole monetary ecosystem that actually is emerging. And I think that is an opportunity, not a problem.
Okay, before we get to opportunity versus a problem, would you tell us whether you think it in fact is a problem for any particular country to have just a single type of currency?
Well, what we've been able to prove scientifically is that a monoculture, that a single currency is a monoculture, is always unstable. So the instability of our monetary system, which has been going on for quite a while, actually since the beginning of the industrial age, we have had a lot of monetary and banking crisis, or national debt crisis, which are all related to the same issue. It's the same system that actually breaks down in different places.
Well, let me ask you about that stability, because if we were meeting at a coffee shop in Canada and we put down some money to pay for our coffee after we were done, that Canadian dollar, we know our government's good for that. Yes, it's been worth more or less over the years compared to its American counterpart. But when you say unstable, are you trying to express some concern about whether the government is good for it?
What I'm saying is just factually, between 1970 and 2010, the IMF has counted 425 crises in our monetary system. So that's more than there are countries, right? So by far. So several countries have gone several times to the treadmill of a monetary or a financial crisis. And we are not stopping. I mean, obviously not out of the woods here in Europe with the euro, although, it's the hottest things have been are now gone. But the banking system requires $1,000 billion according to the Bloomberg in Europe alone, just to become back onto spiff.
How long has the current conventional monetary system been in effect?
Well, there are different aspects of it. The idea of a monopoly of a single currency dates back to Sumer in 3200 BC. So we're talking 5,000 years, more than 5,000 years. The modern form of it, which started with Bank of England and Bank of Sweden back in the 17th century, is about 350 years, 320 years.
Now, of course, digital technology changes everything in every sector nowadays.
Yes.
How has digital technology changed the evolution or the landscape of our monetary system?
Well, it will change every time we have had a fundamental technological shift in money. For example, the creation of paper money 350 years ago. The power to create currency has shifted from one group to another. At the time before that, there was sovereigns that were issuing currency. Today, they're banking systems that are creating the money. And what's happening now with the information age is that anybody with a computer or knows to manage computer networks, which is almost everybody today with the internet, can actually start a currency.
So we could have infinite numbers of currencies out there.
That is not a good idea either. A single currency is a bad idea, and an infinity of currencies is also a bad idea.
So there's a happy medium somewhere.
There is a happy medium.
Well, let's go through this. What's so bad about having just a single currency that we all agree we should do business in?
Instability. As I said earlier, we have had a lot of crises, and we're not out of the woods. That's the main problem. And when something wrong happens with the monetary system, particularly in the form of the banking system, which is creators of money today, well, everything else stops. You know, we've seen this enough in several countries that when the banking system gets in trouble, everything else stops. That's a bad idea because they're actually good at lots of other things that we should do or could do without necessarily having to depend from that system.
Do you think it's actually impossible to have or to take the instability out of a single currency system?
We've tried for 300 years and failed.
So the answer is yes, it's impossible.
Yes. Well, it would make the same claim, and this is not a metaphor, that a monoculture, a forest that only has pines, may be more productive, quote unquote. In other words, it's efficient, but it is unstable. Don't drop a match. Don't drop a cigarette. Don't drop a piece of glass. Or the whole thing is gone.
Okay, but you agreed a moment ago that infinite numbers of currencies would also be a bad idea, which leads me to believe that multiple currencies is a good idea. We just have to agree on how many.
To a certain point. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So where's the sweet spot in all of this?
Well, when you go too far with the number of currencies, you have total stagnation. There are two ways for a complex system to die. One is a crash, which we know when we have not enough diversity, and the other one is stagnation. And if every Canadian or every American had its own currency, we can absolutely be sure that there would be stagnation. Everybody would argue with everybody else, why do you not accept my currency, okay? And nothing would happen. So, but that can be, there is some point in between one and infinity, or hundreds of thousands or millions. We don't know exactly where that point lies yet, but we actually, I'm estimating that we need at least a couple of dozen, but that doesn't mean that everybody participates. It's like having a club. It's not because there are 20 clubs in your town that you need to belong to all of them, do you? You can choose the ones you like.
No, that makes sense, but give us a list. What would be, let's say, for example, a couple of dozen. What's on the list?
On the list is business-to-business currencies. Currencies that are created between corporations, between businesses to trade with each other. Switzerland has been doing this for the last 80 years, actually, although few people seem to be aware of that. A second type of thing are social purpose currencies. If you have an elderly person to take care of, like you have in Japan, there are people there are now 480 systems in different locations to deal with elderly care and handicap care that in a way that doesn't cost any money to the government. So that's another application. You could have city currencies. If you're living in one town, the town may decide to issue a currency, like Bristol has done in England for the last 2 years, in order to activate its own local economy. So these are three types of currencies. And of course, you know, if you don't live There is a Toronto dollar currency, for example, which is more of a loyalty currency of the type of the airlines, but it exists already.
Sorry, I don't know about this. There's a Toronto dollar?
Yes, there's a Toronto dollar, which has been, I don't know what the current status is, but that had been issued about 5 or 7 years ago. It's not one of the most successful ones in my list, but they have tried.
And what would presumably you could only spend it inside the city limits of the city of Toronto.
Exactly.
Now, is it in the interests of the national currency to have smaller, more, let's say, municipally focused currencies? Or is that a problem?
Well, it depends on the mindset in which you're looking at it. Central banks have been created in order to keep a monopoly going. So, and of course, from their perspective, from orthodoxy perspective, they want to go back to a single currency. But that's in fact already history. I mean, I have an inventory of more than 5,000 systems for social purposes in a dozen countries, including the United States and Canada, before the crisis of, in other words, in 2005. The quantity of systems has multiplied since then, and I've stopped counting because it's a full-time job.
Who do you think gets hurt the most when there is only a single monetary currency available to people?
Well, businesses get hurt, and basically anybody gets hurt. The question you're asking is the same as who got hurt in the United States with the crash of 2007, 2008, and tell me people who have not been hurt. I don't think anybody has escaped, basically.
Well, I can think of some rich people on Wall Street who made off okay.
Yes, but you can count them on a couple of hands.
Okay. But essentially you're saying we need more than one, and a couple of dozen would put us in good stead. That would be a very secure system to have.
Yes, of a different nature. We're not talking all the same models.
No, I understand. Now, how these complementary currencies that you just described, business to business or social purpose, how popular are they so far?
Well, it depends on the countries. The country that is most dynamic in this field now is Brazil. The government is launching 200 dual currency banks as we speak. 150 of them are already operational. Back in the second half of the 1990s and the beginning of our millennium, Japan was the most active, so it has moved around. In Europe, it's the United Kingdom, so different places have been catching up on those ideas at different times and different rhythms.
Well, let's follow up on one of those examples that you just gave. Let's go to Japan, where I understand there's a currency, and I hope I'm going to say this properly, called Furykipu.
Furykipu, yes.
Furykipu, which apparently is one of those social purpose currencies that you just described a moment ago to help with the aging population. Can you tell us give us a greater understanding of how that actually works?
Well, the idea is that if I do something for an elderly person or a handicapped person in my neighborhood, for anything that is not covered by national health care, because there's universal and national health care in Japan, so anything that's not covered, like shopping or helping prepare food or preparing for a bath, which is an important ritual in Japan, well, it can help a person doing these things, and I get credits in time in a savings account. This is all electronic. There are 480 systems operational, and they have 2 clearinghouses that cover the country. So I can help an elderly person in my building or in my neighborhood, and my credits, I can send them to my mother who lives in another part of the country, and someone will take care of her there in the same way.
And the credits are not part of the basic monetary union of Japan. There's something else.
No, they're called Furykipu. It's the hour is the unit of account, and it's a savings account normally. So you normally perform these things and put the electronic credits in my account, my savings account, in time.
Electronic credits, so nothing actually changes hands.
Nothing actually changes hands.
So it's a virtual currency.
For that particular currency, yes, that's true.
And why do people trust this?
Well, I suspect that in the case of Japan, one of the drivers may have been guilt. Let's put it in those terms. Because if I cannot take care of my mother because I have a job in town, in another town, actually I feel guilty about not doing something. And this gives me a way of actually doing something for my mother without having to be at the same place where she is. Now, in Europe, we have had now two applications. One has been started in last year in the city of St. Gallen in Switzerland. And there what has happened is that the city tried to implement the Furykipu system, and the reaction of the citizen was, okay, but precisely they asked the question you asked, what happens if that system is not available when I need it? And the city had to guarantee that something will be available, either that system or another system if this system does not work, because it is experimental in in Switzerland. Then the city has guaranteed that they will create another system to make sure that my credits will be honored.
Okay, that helps understand the follow-up I was going to ask, which is, and again, going back to that example of you and I getting that cup of coffee, we know that if you pick up the tab for my coffee, the government of Canada is going to backstop that money that you use to pay for the bill. But how do we know for sure, beyond we're all in this and we all agree that we're going to do this, how do we know for sure that this thing really exists and will continue to exist in the future?
Well, as I said, the case of St. Gallen actually shows that we are not sure. This is another way of organizing our society. This is another way, because it is quite sure that with the aging society, the older models, the previous models, where someone will take care of it with paid in dollars, in Japan, which is the fastest aging population in the world, the government would simply go bankrupt. That's as simple as that. You cannot cover all the needs when you have the pension program invented in Germany in the 19th century under Bismarck. The life expectancy was 48. Well, now it's 75 to 80. So the same system will not work.
Now, this works in Japan, I guess, because culturally, people have agreed that this is an area of our society that needs dealing with, and they've found a unique solution to handle it.
Yes.
But that's Japan. Do you think those kinds of agreements could be transferred, let's say, to the Western Hemisphere, Canada or the United States?
Why not? It's that one or other models. I'm not saying that we're going to copy the whole thing exactly, as stated earlier. The case of St. Gallen, actually, they had to modify something. They had to actually provide a guarantee of the city. But with the guarantee, people have been willing to do it. I suspect that something similar could happen in the United States. Why not?
Do you need, though, an official institution or arm of the government of the day to guarantee this? Or is this something that people can just sort of run on their own and agree that it will work?
In Japan, it works that way without having a government guaranteeing it. In Switzerland, people want some guarantee. And probably in the United States and Canada also, in my suspicion, for that particular model. There are other systems. There are a number of time banking systems already operational, over 300 in the United States right now, which are mostly in poorer neighborhoods and in environments where everybody's time is roughly equal. Because one of the systems there is that everybody's time is considered equal. So 1 hour equals 1 hour. And I can do something for you for an hour. And I will get some services from some other person of our network, not necessarily from you individually, in order to make that happen. These systems are now operational.
And just so I'm clear, in Japan, Furykipu is sort of tracked and made legitimate by the government of Japan, is that right?
Well, no. They have actually introduced the legislation of a non-profit in Japan for this particular project. It was not existing in the Japanese constitution that was left by the United States back in just after World War II. And that particular legislation for NGOs, for non-profit organizations, was created in 1995 in order to make this system work.
I see. Okay. So we've got about a minute and a half to go here, and let me ask you one last thing, which is, we've talked about alternative currencies. What kind of alternative currencies do you think need to be introduced into North American society?
I think we have a number of issues. One of them is employment, which can be improved significantly with the kind of model that has been implemented in Switzerland for 80 years, a business-to-business currency, particularly helpful for small and medium-sized businesses, who create the employment. I think the elderly issue is slower in America, but is also happening. It's a question of 5 or 10 years slower than what happens in Europe or Japan, but it is written on where it's going. We have ecological currencies that have been started in some places, like Brazil, several places in Europe. So they're different purposes, and I think all of them, or at least several of them, would be very, very relevant for the issues that North America is dealing with right now.
Well, Bernard Lietaer, you have done exactly what the title of your book suggests. You have got us rethinking money. That's the name of your book.
Thank you.
Rethinking Money, How New Currencies Turn Scarcity into Prosperity. Bernard Lietaer, it's awfully good of you to join us via Skype from Brussels tonight. Thanks so much.
It was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.